And we are live. All right, I had the menu up already. I was getting ahead of ourselves, Pete, but I'm thirsty. You know what I'm saying? So I had to get into it. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Ten-Four Tavern. It's September 9th, 2 days before 9/11, 2025. It's 7:05 Eastern Standard Time. Welcome to the Ten-Four Tavern. Pete, welcome. We got a special guest today. Going to talk about not just 9/11, but the 93 bombing, which I think of the World Trade Center is really an interesting prelude to some things that have happened. And I think we'll probably get into it with Tom in the future because I think his career needs a whole other episode. So we're going to keep it to the bombings and the 9/11 and then your experience and then my experience because I think they're both interesting and unique. So Pete, good to see you, brother. What's going on?
Not much, brother. Dialing in from South Georgia. Got to speak with some federal law enforcement, well, not federal law enforcement executives from around the country and a gentleman from Australia. So we're talking about 9/11, as a matter of fact. I mean, it's this week, you know, every year it kind of weighs heavily on me, and you think it's going to get better, and it doesn't, because, you know, you look at the Officer Down Memorial page and you see more friends died as a result of the cancers from 9/11. So I'm glad we're here keeping the memory of that day alive, because people say never forget, but man, I look at some of our elected officials, you know, without naming names, some of them have clearly forgotten, and it's just despicable, you know?
For sure.
Excited to have Tommy on the show, though.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Detective Tom McCale, Port Authority Police Department, retired detective. Also worked in the major case with the NYPD. We'll talk about that, a little Tom Nerney action, FBI, Newark, JTTF, and then a whole bunch of great stuff. But we're going to keep it to the 93 and the 9/11 experiences for Tom. And then, like I said, we'll get Tom on in the future for his career because it's stellar and it's interesting. There's a lot of great stuff. So, Tom McCale, welcome to the Ten-Four Tavern, brother.
Hey, gentlemen, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Honored to have you.
That's good. So, listen, we have it's the tavern. So, Pete in Brunswick, Georgia, is ripping up a Michelob Ultra. And, you know, it is what it is. You get what you can when you can, you know?
Tommy, it's ice water. It's ice water. It was the best choice of what they had in the hotel fridge. It's not a fancy hotel, but
it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. But, yeah, so I'm drinking, it was a gift. I think it was from my nephew. I'm not 100% sure. It's Four Roses single barrel Kentucky bourbon. So, I'm going to do that on a single rock, nice. And then just sip tonight a little bit, and then we'll do that. And then, Tom, I understand you're knocking back the heavy Poland Springs.
Yeah, it's the sparkling Poland Springs. You know,
sparkling. Sorry,
sparkling. Yeah,
I didn't get that. Sorry.
So we're clear. The bubbly.
I'm going to talk to the production team. They're not doing their backgrounds. It's not good. It's not good. It's not good. So, listen, what's going on, guys? Really special episode. Thanks for doing it. Sometimes people don't even want to even get into the ring. Usually around a week before, sometimes 2 weeks before, people kind of shut it down. That's not me. I'll talk about this anytime, anywhere, because I feel it's the never forget. But it affects people different ways, different things. And I know, Pete, you got a lot of experience with that too. And then we'll go to Tom and see, where he's at.
Yeah, man, look, it weighs heavily on me, as it should. You know, I mean, we all lost friends that day. It's an attack on our country, which in of itself, you know, is something that we should be offended and hurt by. But no, you're right, Tommy. It's, you know, we used to run a program at the 9/11 Memorial Museum, and, you know, we ran it for ATF, and we had agents who were there at Ground Zero who couldn't show up. And they were scheduled to show up, said they would be there. They would get near Ground Zero and turned around and just went back home. So, I mean, look, we've gotten past that, you and I, and obviously Tommy, but there's some folks who still can't talk about it, can't set foot on Ground Zero. And you know what? I don't blame them. You know, I mean, folks deal with grief in different ways. And 24 years ago seems like just yesterday.
Yeah. So, Tom, how are you feeling today? I'm sure coming up on 2 days from now, I'm sure you got a lot of things going on, and I know there's some other stuff going on. Anyone want to share some stuff with the audience?
Yeah, I'm usually heavily involved with the Port Authority PBA with the 9/11 families. We have we have a memorial service and a reception, but unfortunately this year I took sick end of July, August, I had an ablation that went sideways. They perforated my heart. I wound up in CCU, ICU, on ventilator, the whole 9 yards. Respiratory system crashed, blah, blah, blah. So I'm down for the count now, but, I'll be back next year. But my wife's still doing what she does best, for the families and for the PBA. So just home recuperating.
All right. Well, listen, to get started, we are going to focus on your 93 experience at the World Trade Center and then everything that happened to you on that day, which is significant. And then we'll talk about our joined experiences of 9/11. But just give us a little snippet of your career, kind of a teaser, definitely for another episode, because we will bring you back to talk about your long career and all the work that you've done, not only in the NYPD major case assignments with the BLA and all the terrorist domestic, but also the foreign terrorism, JTTF stuff too. So at least a little bit of who you are in the background, because they know Pete and I, and they're kind of sick of us already. So.
All right, I did 29 years at the Port Authority Police. Prior to that, I was a union iron worker. Did 10 years of both. I worked mainly in the PATH precinct. The PATH trains running from Jersey to New York. Most of the Uptown Patrol, which was from World Trade Center to 33rd Street. Making calls in the 6th, 13th, South precincts, the 10th sometimes, 1st. Got 6th precinct cop of the month as a uniform cop at PATH. Promoted to detective in 95. Sent to the JTTF. Then co-assigned to the NYPD major case squad. I had the knack for solving cold case homicides of police officers by the Black Liberation Army. Then of course, working overseas with the JTTF led me to assign with the Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force, where I was assigned to both the Green Beret and Navy SEALs in Afghanistan.
Yeah. All right. We were on mute because we were getting a little bit of an echo for a second there. So thanks for that, Tom. So Pete, you have an interesting experience as well. And then you've also spoken at the 9/11 Memorial Museum, and then you've done other speaking spots about your experiences. Want to share a little bit with that. And then I do have a video that you gave me, the short version and the long version. We're going to do the short version tonight, I think, if that's okay.
Yeah. No, look, I was there at Ground Zero on 9/11. I got there shortly after the first plane hit. Spent 2 nights there, frankly. I mean, I never left. Saw the buildings collapse on shortly after. 3 of my very close friends walked into the plaza underneath, because the towers, as you know, they sat on a mezzanine. So I watched John Coughlin, who was a sergeant when I first got to PSA 8, Vinny Danz, who I went through the academy with and went to Operation Pressure Point with, and Walter Weaver, who was a young cop when I was a detective in the 4-7, used to come up to the squad room and talk about watches. The kid loved watches. I watched them walk in to the plaza right before the South Tower fell, and I knew there was no way in hell they got out. It was devastating. Later, when I went home on day number 3, found out that 4 other friends were lost that day. 3 other police officers and a firefighter, Danny Hartland, who was originally a housing cop that jumped ship, traded in his badge and gun for boots and a pillow. So, I mean, it's rough. And then, look, Tommy, to be honest with you, I struggled for a while after 9/11 with the fact that I was alive. You lose friends like that, and you say, why were they gone? I right across the street from them when the building fell. I wound up jumping under a fire truck to try to avoid shit hitting me when it fell down. And you wonder why. And then, as you know, later on, 2017, I wound up getting diagnosed with lung cancer in my right lung, lost the right lung. And look, it's an eye opener, because you realize, first off, I lost 7 friends. Like I said, Tommy, I was on the Officer Down Memorial page the other day, just to see, and I hate going on that page, 31 other friends since then. When I moved out of New York, I lost touch with some of them, but some of them were guys I worked with for years. Others I worked with for a couple of weeks. Some of them were bosses. So yeah, man, 31 in addition to the 7 from one cowardly attack on our country. It's just unfathomable. It's a burden that we all carry now from this point forward. You can't forget what we lived through and what we saw, and that's why I think it's important that we're having conversations like these, because some heroes were taken from us, and the politicians are full of shit when they say never forget, because they forget, and it's clear they've forgotten. So it's on people like us to keep the memory of those heroes alive, and hopefully we stay alive in the process, because as we know, man, we're losing people every day.
So to prove that they do forget, I think this is a good segue to go to Tom and let him talk about 1993. And then that was, and Tom, you know what? You and I have never talked about this. I've read the books. I've read the news. I've done my peripheral research. I was in the squad. I was never in the Joint Terrorism Task Force, even though I have tons of friends, including Joey Herbert, who was a guest 2 weeks ago. But like, there was a warning, was there not?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't on a JTTF then, but
Right.
Reading the same things that you read, yeah, there was sources who said, they're going to take down a skyscraper, and things to that matter. That source apparently was fired and then rehired again because he was on point. But yeah, there's unfortunately there was things missed in '93, and the same with and of course Ramzi Youssef coming in at the same time as one of the other co-conspirators, and getting through. But it happened. It happened. And of course, we all know 9/11. How many people dropped the ball on that. There's no getting around that at all. No, I mean, and hopefully, will we learn from the mistakes? I doubt it, because who was held accountable?
Yeah.
I don't know, and anybody that dropped the ball was promoted.
Yeah. So we can talk about, like, I really want to bring you back for the full stuff that you can share with us in regard to that. But you had a very incredible day in '93. I know you were injured. You have an interesting story on how you were saved, actually, I think. So why don't you just walk us through the '93 bombing first, and your experience that day?
Yeah, well, February 26th, I was out with an injury. I was injured going to an 85 or a 13, and a police officer needs assistance at the 9th Street pass station, and I sprained my ankle pretty seriously going down the stairs. But actually, what hurt worse, and Tom, you said he worked for you, was Danny Gardner from the 6th Precinct was one of the officers that carried me up the stairs, and he was just mother effing me and called me every cowardly thing in the book because I didn't get to the 13 because I sprained my ankle going down the stairs. He's like, but that's Danny, and I'll revisit Danny on 9/11 when we get to that. But anyway, so I'm out with the soft cast on. I go to the medical, Port Authority Medical, lack of better terms, in the World Trade Center. That day there was a promotional ceremony at Patty Golden from the 6th was getting made. So I go over there, see Patty. After my medical appointment, I run into Mike O'Keefe. And I asked Mike if from the 3-4, he had the shooting of Kiko Garcia, the riots that followed. And he tells me, like, are things cooling down? He goes, get today's paper, Daily News. So as I go back to the World Trade Center to get the PAD train home, I see the Daily News, and it's front page Mike McHale story on locomotion and Mike O'Keefe. So I'm like, holy shit! I didn't know it was front page. So I grabbed the Daily News. I start reading that, and the bomb goes off. What was strange was I'm on the path concourse level at the World Trade Center. The van is above my head against the wall. So as I remember, and I testified at the first trial of the first 4 terrorists. I remember the walls and the concrete and the rebar caving in first, and then the sound, not the other way around. And there's guys in the bomb squad and all, and especially the place where you were at, Pete. They describe, well, when you're that close to it, that's exactly what happens. And I forget why, velocity versus this versus that. I'm not a scientist, but
that's for the smart guys, Tom. That's for the smart guys to figure.
Exactly. But I didn't, as benign as that might have sounded, I didn't change my testimony at trial. I testified just to that, the walls and all came down first. It landed on some guy, that was standing in my eyesight. And then this priest came out of nowhere. So I went in and donned the Scott Air Pack, which Port Authority police officers are trained both in rescue, fire rescue, and, not firefighters, but Scott Air, wearing Scott Air Pack and all. And I knew there was one in the path, what they call E-rooms, emergency rooms that we have throughout the path system. So at the path E-room at World Trade Center, I donned the Scott Air Pack. I come out, I take the concrete and rebar off the guy that was crushed. This priest comes out of nowhere. He's the guy survived, but the priest gives him last rites or praying over him. And then we start going towards the bowels of the World Trade Center where the bomb was, where the deceased were. And I remember this individual air conditioning. Prior to that, the concourse level filled up with like a rust-colored haze, as if you're looking when your barbecue is fully blown and closed, and you see the heat, and you can't see through it because it's wavy. So it was just like that. So it was wavy, but it was rust-colored. And later on, it's determined that that's the burning urea nitrate, and that's what I inhaled and burnt my esophagus. So I had chemical and smoke inhalation, which later on would cause hypoxia after I did, approximately 12 hours of rescue, including the fireman when Kevin Shea fell in a hole. Being I was an iron worker, I walked out on an exposed beam, lowered a Stokes basket, and it was Transit had their own department at that time, and it was Transit ESU. They had a ladder that snapped together end to end. Our ESU, which was called the not rescue truck, but anyway, it was our ESU wasn't called ESU, it was called ERV, emergency rescue vehicle. Jimmy Wheeler, myself, and the Transit and New York City ESU worked together with the fire department to get Shea out of the hole. And just maybe 2 years ago, there was a picture posted of that rescue, and the fireman to my right in the picture, the left side of the photograph, is Gary Geidel. I find out from his daughter. Gary was killed in 9/11, but he's in a photograph of us putting Shea in the ambulance. So getting back to that, we go in and into the bowels of the Trade Center where we're digging out, and we dug out Monica Smith, but one of the maintenance guys just identifies her to me as Monica Rodriguez. He didn't know that she had married, so I notified my captain that we have one deceased. I gave it to him as Monica Rodriguez, only to later find out that she was Smith, and unfortunately she was pregnant. But then I returned again to the where the workshops were, the locksmith, the plumbers. They were all housed in the bowels of the World Trade Center, and we dug out two more Port Authority workers, Knapp and Kirkpatrick, who were deceased. And then I go back to the E room where I get a hold of my wife, and I tell her that, look, I'm probably going to be going to the hospital. I had like a stain around my mouth that even after the hospital they couldn't take off. But then I hear about the children up in the 90s, the floors of the 90s. So myself, Ron Nafee, Wheeler, and a bunch of other guys make our way up to Tower, to the we set up a triage in like the 95th floor. And then we posted cops and first responders every other floor because there was no lighting in in the hallways in the World Trade Center. They didn't have to have lighting, so we posted a person every other floor, and then had somebody, somebody in between so many kids, like 10 kids, 10 kids, firemen, and they escorted the kids. They walked them down from the 95th floor. There was 23 people who had to be evacuated by helicopter. So I went on a city radio, and I was speaking to aviation directly, and they're like, look, just, I said, well, I have pregnancies, asthmatics, whatever, wheelchair. I said, they're not going to, they can't make the stairs, down. So they airlifted stair chairs up, and we brought them down to the 95th floor. Not me. I'm still nursing my my ankle injury that Danny Gardner makes fun of me for, and then other guys carry these people up this, from the 95th floor up to the roof of 2 tower, where aviation comes in and picks these people off the roof and brings them down. And I think it was close to midnight, and this 2 of my radio has since died, so 2 officers find me, Elliot Houston and Darcy Licorice, and they're like, hey, we got to, you got to get out of here. And by that time, the elevators were inspected and all, so we brought the last person down, an asthmatic. We brought her down by elevator, So, and then I got back to the precinct, and everybody was, of course, going to the bar. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. And the sergeant and John Collins, who just passed away from 9/11 cancer, is like, no, you're going to the hospital. So I go to a local hospital in Jersey City, St. Francis. They check my blood oxygen, and I'm at like 67. I have hypoxia. They put me in ICU. I go downhill really quickly, and then I get they're like, we got to get him out of here. We got to get him to a burn unit. So with this, and both you guys know this because of the knuckleheads and the 6th precinct, I hear of the fake phone call to the TS about a helicopter landing with a guy pounding his chest and a hole. So I'm in the ICU ward at St. Francis, and the nurses I know from my neighborhood are taking care of me, and they're like, the phone rings at the desk. It has a long cord. They're like, oh yeah, hold on a second. So they bring the phone over and it's like, hello, yeah. It goes, yeah, Tom, this is Sergeant Jack Casey from the police commissioner's office. I'm like, yeah, go F yourself. Click, I hang up the phone, And then with that, he calls back, and the phone comes over to me again. I'm like, hello, and now he's a little more stern. He goes, Police Officer McHale, this is Sergeant Casey with the, and here's my callback number 374. I know the numbers. I'm like, oh boy. I'm like, Sarge, I really apologize. I thought it was the guys in the lake tour to sit. He goes, no. He goes, I spoke to your wife already. We want to send a helicopter to get you. They went to Cornell, but we had a snowstorm, so they sent the ICU bus from St. Barnabas Burn Center in Livingston, where I was transferred there, and I made a total of like 11 days in the hospital and then I had 2 years as an outpatient, that's 93.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. Jeez. 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years. I had I developed the heart and lung issues. Lost my hearing, part of my hearing, which only got worse, after 9/11. So that and when they and I also had these lesions that would pop up. And it was always two of them, I don't want to gross out your readers, but your viewers. But I mean, it was it went on for 2 years, and 95, I was finally discharged, fully from the burn unit team at St. Barnabas. My pulmonologist and cardiologist and the rest of the crew.
Yeah, so we talked about Yeah, thank God, indeed. But we talk about the politicians who, say never forget, with both days. And, I don't think any of them are aware of stories like what you just talked about, Tommy, where, cops go in there and put themselves in harm's way. And yeah, some die, and they pay their respects. And I say that with quotes around respects at a funeral. I don't think they realize how many people go through something like what you went through, where you're 2 years of struggling to get back to being normal. I mean, that's sacrifice. And wow, it's very compelling to hear. So I'm glad you made it back,
Pete,
man.
Not to interrupt you, but I mean, politicians, you're absolutely correct. There's guys in my own job who were active at that time who were on social media and, claiming, thank God nobody was seriously injured. And actually, a 9/11 widow comes and says, "Oh, yes, there was, Tommy McCale, oh no, I never." So now he or his wife start arguing with a 9/11 widow over. And I'm like, and of course this guy was a complete daffodil. You know what I mean? He was a donut. We both know what those guys.
Donut.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, and of course, the widow is absolutely right. And then of course the person comes back with, "Oh, well, I didn't know." Well, don't say if it never happened because you didn't know.
Right.
But yeah, Pete, I mean, so that there are guys that were on my job who don't know all the facts.
Exactly. You were finally recognized, Tom. What did you were awarded a medal, and then you moved on to bigger and better things. Thank God for that. I think the country is better off as a result. So how did they finally recognize you?
Well, it was kind of bittersweet. I mean, they gave out like individual valor, World Trade Center Valor Awards, and they gave out group valor. How you have a group valor, I don't know, but it's a kind of an oxymoron. But anyway, I didn't go to the medal ceremony. I had I wasn't in the best relationship at the time with the Port Authority. And actually, I probably wouldn't have gone anywhere if it wasn't for Frank Bruno, who was a sergeant in the 6th Precinct at the time. Signed a lot of my paperwork, especially the McGillas. We would process them at the World Trade Center at the Path Command, but if it was in McGill, we would stay at the precinct of occurrence, and process it at the 6th or the 13th or the South. So I became very familiar with Frank Bruno, and through him and through our mutual friend P.D. Marsala, who owned Barrel's Pub, and Pete was instrumental, in my career, early, later, and even afterwards. He's still giving me advice, He's still got
fantastic. That's a whole episode in and of itself.
Oh my God, that's a series.
Yeah.
So, it was Frank Bruno who actually got me promoted to, who had me promoted to when George Marlin came in and George Pataki. That was the team that was in, and so it was the Brooklyn connection with Marty Golden and Frank. Like I said, Frank later went on to be Patty Lynch's chief of staff, and he has since passed away. But what a great guy, He wasn't a Dutch uncle, wasn't a relative, He was a sergeant that signed my 61s, and luckily for me, he was like the confidential advisor to the executive director. He gave himself one of those nice titles, But Frank.
So what's that station in the 6th? What is it? Is it Christopher Street? What's the Port Authority station that comes into the 6th?
There's three of them. There's Christopher Street Station, Christopher and Greenwich, 9th Street, which is 9th and 6th, and 14th Street, which is 14th and 6th. So there's three stations in 6th Precinct, and the 23rd Street and the 13th, and 32nd Street Station, 33rd Street Station in the South. Yeah,
so that's where you got to know all my buddies in District 2. The Killer Bees, Barry and Brosnan, those guys, and
I knew Wayne Healy.
Wayne Healy. Oh, you're doing Midnights.
Yeah, Wayne tour guy. Come on. Was there any other tour? Yeah, Wayne, I'm telling you. Well, another time we'll talk. We'll get into those stories. But I mean, those transit, their plain clothes guys were so good that transit cop is injured shooting on 4th Street, perps are running up 5th Avenue. My partner and I jump out, and now we've seen these guys every night. Every night we've seen them. We would usually have a meal at the Waverly Diner, maybe just a soup or something. They would be in there, but I mean, we've seen them. So now the cop is hurt. Up comes two of the black officers. I recognize my partner doesn't. He goes to grab them, and I'm like, no. I go, they're on. I go, they're trans. They're on. He didn't recognize him. And we had the perp. Of course, we turned them over to them. It was, your guy was injured. But it was hysterical that he didn't immediately recognize him. That's how good they were. That's they were. All the way from there to 33rd Street. What was Tommy's name? Not Macaulay. Was it Macaulay? Real thick glasses. He was just a collaring machine.
Yeah, the District 2 guys, very good. I mean, all the transit cops were. I mean, I have nothing bad to say at all. My transit experience before the merger was just phenomenal. I was reluctant. I think Pete has a strong opinion on this as a housing cop. We were anti, but once it happened and you couldn't beat it, it opened up opportunities I never would have saw without it. So I am grateful for my time in transit. I love transit. I am transit through and through. But at the same time, I'm very grateful for the NYPD and the opportunities they gave me. Before I go to Pete on the housing comment, and then we'll move along. DJ VR, 1999 to the podcast. Poland Spring Sparkling for Tom McCale, all he can drink. So thank you, DJ VR.
Yeah, Tommy, the hostile takeover, brother. Listen, if we never merged, I would still be a housing detective. I loved that job. It was the best job I ever had. We treated each other like family. Captain knew your kids' names. You knew the captain's kids' names. Then we went to NYPD, and look, I had a good career in NYPD, but you were just a number there. You know what I mean? They didn't really care about you. It's a different world. The other thing, man, is this was a little scam that a lot of folks didn't know. And I think transit probably had it too, because we were employed by an authority. We got unlimited sick, but if you got hurt, you also got workers' comp. So, and sometimes with workers' comp, there was a payout. And NYPD cops didn't have that luxury where if your shoulder got jammed up, that you wound up getting like 15 grand because they decided you lost like 20% of the mobility of your shoulder. So, yeah, there were things, there's a lot of things that went south when we merged. Yeah, I'd still be a housing cop if it wasn't for that dark day and that Giuliani.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, Tom, thanks for all of that. I mean, like you said, I was down in that area and I did not know that. The idea that there were people within the Port Authority Police Department not even fully aware of what's going on. I mean, the cops are going to do their thing every day. They're going to grind every day. Sometimes they get recognized. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's elevated. Sometimes it's not. But what I think is beautiful is you were never discouraged and you came back even bigger and stronger and you did monumental things for our country, not just the Port Authority, New York, New Jersey. And we'll get into that in a sec. So why don't we go to Pete? Like Pete, let's jump up to 9/11, the day of. I have not a heroic story, but just a story that when I tell my civilian friends and private sector since I've retired, they talk about bad days, and I help them understand what a real bad day is. And then it puts everything into perspective because it's not only World Trade Center, 9/11, planes crashing and the collapse of those buildings, which is the worst thing you could possibly think of. I have things to add to that, which is, again, not heroic, but just interesting to say, oh, you think you had a bad day? You have no idea what a bad day is. So, Pete, let's do it.
Well, I mean, look, you saw the speech I gave at the 9/11 Memorial Museum. It's about an hour long. We don't have that kind of time here. So But I mean, the things that really stand out, Tommy, like I got there right after the first plane hit. And I remember I was with a detective named John Faust at first. And the plan was going to, hey, we got to stick together because there was so much chaos going on. So, we went up to the above the plaza where the ball was between the two towers. And we walked towards the south tower, which hadn't been hit yet. And, see this young EMT tending to a patient. She's down on her hands and knees. The guy's all banged up. And then the second plane hits. And I turn around and look at where this EMT was. And I literally see a gaping wound in her head. And I watched all the color leave her face. Her eyes stop blinking. And, you look back at things and you say, well, what should I have done differently? And I never checked her pulse or anything. I assumed she was dead. I wish I had. But then, I saw the people jumping. Look, we were cops for a long time. When jumpers jumped, right normal days, you'd show up and it was a crime scene, right? Or it was someone sitting on a roof ledge waiting to be talked down. People wanted to jump, they jumped, and there was no negotiation. It was the first time I ever saw somebody fall like that. And I remember just like the first person I saw, I remember like bracing, like I was going to get punched in the face because I didn't want to hear what it would sound like when they hit the ground. And the sad part, brother, is here we are 24 years later. I can still hear those sounds, man. I can still see it. And then the second person I saw jump didn't hit the ground. They hit one of the overhangs, which right underneath EMTs were triaging patients at. So, and made a completely different horrific sound. And you wondered, like, at that point, like, what's going through their minds? Like, why are they jumping? Is it so hot up there? Is the heat rising? Or have they given up hope? Now at the second. So, I mean, there's just so much to process. And then, like I said, after that, I went down because, like when there's a fire drill, everybody's supposed to show up somewhere so they can count heads. Well, the ATF officers were at 6 World Trade, and the second in command, John O'Brien, is like, hey, man, no one showed up. Go into the site and find people. And that's when I went down there and I was across the street when the South Tower fell. I was standing there with the first 2 agents I found, Jason Zamoloff and Sal Emilio. And like I said, man, when the South Tower started to crumble, I started running north, and I jumped under a fire truck and hid there for probably 20 seconds and then realized, hey, stupid, you're going to suffocate under here. Coupled with the fact that once that dust cloud hit you in the face, it's like having your eyeballs sandpapered. So, I mean, it's just so many things from that day, And look, it's really easy. I don't want to make this a bummer all around because it's a horrible, sad day. But, I think about the rescue. I think about the Bucket Brigade, a lot of heroism. You hear the stories about people who could have left. Look, we were cops and firemen. I was an agent at the time. We were paid to take risks. You hear stories about like somebody who's able-bodied and they were with someone who was disabled or couldn't leave, and they decided, hey, instead of leaving them there, they stayed and they died. Man, talk about heroism. So I think about that. And then I think about the days after, man, where we had people showing up. I remember there was this one crew that came up and they were cooking outside the FBI command post. They were barbecuing. And they were there for a few days, and I started bullshitting with them one day. And they were an Alcoholics Anonymous chapter from Texas that drove up, and they grilled for first responders on their own dime, and they slept in their cars. And you think about those stories, how the community came together. And then, man, you guys, I know you know this. When you would leave the lower quadrant in Manhattan, and you got to that choke point on West Street, and there were thousands of people standing there applauding when you went in and when you came out, handing you bottles of water. I mean, that's what I think of too, because it's real easy to focus on the horrible shit we saw. But look, I wish we could live every day in this country like it was September 12th, where people didn't give a shit what color you were, what political bent you were from. We all pulled together. And that's why I get so mad when you look at politics now that, man, we were all united in the days that followed September 11th. And man, I don't know that we've ever been more divided than we are now. It's appalling. It's despicable. So I'll just leave it at that. I know there's a lot of stories from that day, and mine is no more important than anybody else's,
Yeah. So Pete did if it's okay with you guys, we've got some time. Pete has spoken at the museum, and he's spoken at Fletzy and a whole bunch of other places. I'm going to play a video, if it's okay with you guys, on the 9/11 Pete's memory. And then, if it's okay, we'll jump into some other conversations. We'll comment on that. So let me see if I can pull this up. Share screen. Going, and we're going to pull that up. And we're going to do it.
My name is Peter Forcelli. On September 11th, 2001, I was brand new special assigned to the New York Field Division. During
Can you guys hear
September
it?
of 2001, I
Yes.
was working on a case that involved a number of home invasions. So I was reporting pretty much on a daily basis to the U.S. Attorney's Office down in Lower Manhattan, which is about a quarter of a mile from Ground Zero. I left for work. It was a beautiful day, I remember. I had a government car that was kind of beat up, so I was a newer agent. I had 170 plus thousand miles on it, no air conditioning. It was an old 1993 Cutlass Calais. So I was driving to work, had the windows down, which was nice because it was a beautiful day with no air conditioning. That was a benefit. And I remember getting to around the Williamsburg Bridge when I got a phone call from my boss, Jerry Raffa, telling me that a plane had hit the World Trade Center. At that point, the skyscrapers blocked my view of the Trade Center. So I envisioned that it was a small propeller plane or a tourist type plane. I never in a million years thought it would have been an airliner that carried passengers, like, transcontinental type plane. When I arrived on the scene, I saw that there was a large hole in the North Tower that had been hit by a plane. I was a police officer for 15 years before I came on with ATF. So realistically, the only training that I had that was helpful is just what you learn as a cop, which was to try to keep people moving so that first responders can get to help those who were trapped in the building or those that were injured. So I was there for a short time at ground level and realized that there were people up in the plaza, which is one level up. So I ran up a set of concrete steps that's located on Vesey Street and Church Street. And I was in the plaza helping to keep people moving, again, allowing first responders to be able to get into the complex. And that's when the second plane hit. So while I was there, there was a young EMT who was tending to a patient just a few feet away from me. And I remember looking at her, she's probably like 22, 24 years old. And then when that plane hit that second time, when I turned back to look in her direction, she'd been killed, like right there on the spot. So I continued just to do what I was doing, which again, you can't be trained for something like this because there's just so much happening, which was to just try to get folks to keep moving because, now the scene had become even more dangerous because not only did you have one tower that was on fire, you had two. And there was debris falling from the buildings. And there were also instances where you would see people jumping from the buildings, which is a difficult thing to see and candidly to hear. So it was just a matter of just trying to help fill in the holes, deal with things as they arose and just try to do as much as you could to help the people who you could help. It's weird. Like I've had people ask me, hey, were you scared? And truthfully, I wasn't scared. And it's not because I'm brave, because I'm not a brave guy. I'm just a regular human. So it was just like this really overwhelming feeling of kind of just being helpless, Frank. I mean, you just can't mentally prepare yourself for something of this magnitude. Now, so me and Bill Sheldon went and we found Kara and we got her out of the car and we brought her to Beekman Downtown Hospital, which is about a half a mile away. She wasn't walking very well, so we had to help her walk. And, she wasn't injured and she wasn't pinned in the car like you would expect, like from a car accident. She was just paralyzed with fear because she was pregnant at the time. And she was worried about how breathing that stuff in would affect her unborn child. So I remember when we took her to the hospital, as we were approaching the hospital, we saw right out front, there were empty gurneys and there were people outside in scrubs, doctors, nurses. And as we approached, they almost became like angry with us, like because they wanted to know where's all the patients. And here we were bringing one person for treatment. But it was weird. Like they were expecting mass casualty incident. But what had happened is the folks that were in those buildings either got out or died. Bill Sheldon, who helped me get Kara to the hospital, later passed away of a 9/11 related cancer. In fact, I myself in 2017 had my right lung removed because I also wound up getting cancer as a result of responding to that attack. I lost 6 very good friends on September 11th that were cops with me, and one gentleman who was a cop who became a fireman. I lost him that day. Not easy to lose that many colleagues that you work with and that you went to barbecues with. Coping with that was challenging. But since then, I have lost 21 good friends to 9/11 related cancers. Tommy, that video was made in 2018, 2019. And here we are, right? That said the number was 21. And I just, before we went live, I told you, looking at the ODMP, it's 31 now.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. So Pete, thanks for letting me share that video. I thought it was a good 5-minute video to share and tell your story. Is there anything else you want to add? I'd like to just tell you guys what happened to me that day, and it was kind of interesting. And then we'll let Tom take it from there for a while.
No,
Good?
like the only thing I'll say is that, the reason they even started that we formed this relationship with the 9/11 Memorial Museum was, truthfully, ATF's response there was erased. All you heard about was the Bureau and the police departments. So that, we had our offices at World Trade Center. So we, again, started telling the stories. And there's, like I said, our stories are no more important than anybody else's. But it's just that we wanted to be remembered that we were there, because, like I said, FBI did a really good job of talking about that they were there. And we just kind of faded off into obscurity for a while. So, but that's all I have to say.
Yeah, that's all right. Any final comment on that, Tom, before I just give you my little, because part of the podcast, our promo was that we're going to share our experiences. But we really want to dig into your stuff. But any comment on that, Tom?
From me?
Yeah.
Oh, no. When you mentioned John Faust, John was in Arson and Explosion.
Yep.
When I
I worked a triple homicide with him. He's very good. Very good.
So John gets wind. Well, word gets around that some Port Authority detectives coming up to work with Ernie on Foster and Laurie homicides from 1972, BLA, blah blah blah, and one of the glorified translators detectives is scurrying out with a cabinet, an index card cabinet that Joe Tidmarsh made. So it's basically an indices before there was like an FBI indices. So Joe Tidmarsh took the time to cross-reference DD5s on every BLA incident in the 5 boroughs, and who was with whom in the whole 9 yards, including photos that were no longer available because they died. The perps died, and the photos are now expunged from when you go to get the arrest photos. So Joe, Joe, of course he was deceased at the time, but his work was absolutely detrimental to solve.
Hold on a second, guys. I just got to say, my buddy Dick, Brooklyn North, University of Brooklyn North, right here, giving me a re-up on some H2O. All right, bud.
Say thank you, Mr. Tom and Mr. Pete, for your service.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
9/11, right, buddy?
Yep.
We'll never forget, right?
I have one of those shirts from Steve Theophanis. He gave me. I still have mine somewhere, But anyway, so John Faust stops this detective from throwing away the entire file cabinet. So he has it on a hand truck, and John's like, he intercepts this guy. He's like, listen, there's somebody coming up here that's going to be work, So he hijacks the file cabinet and keeps it in A&E. I get up there, and John's like, hey, how you doing? I'm John Faust. I go, hey, Tom McCale. He goes, I got something you might be interested in, and it's a treasure trove. It's a gold mine. I'm like, oh, So if John didn't stop this guy from, throwing this, this gold stash out, I don't know if we would have been able to solve the additional crimes that we did, after I was assigned to Major K Squad.
Yeah, well,
that's my John Faust story.
Yeah, he was part of the first group I was in. He was actually deputized as an ATF agent as part of the Joint Terrorism Task Force. So that's how I knew John. Frankly, great guy, old school, which I appreciate. Yeah.
Okay, so before we get into it, couple of things. So my 9/11 day was it's kind of interesting. Nowhere near as involved as both guys. But what is also important is my son, who just came in and wanted to drop off an ice cube and some water for me. He was born in 2013, and this is why I think it's important. And he always heard about 9/11, but he never knew what it was. And he always asked me, once he was able to understand what that may or may not have been, because he doesn't really know. And he would ask me over and over again, like, what is that? And what is that? And what is 9/11? And what was the World Trade Center? And what is all this activity? And I would give him some light conversation. And so what had happened, I felt he was finally of age. And in December of 2024, so almost a year ago now, himself, his mother, my wife, and I took a trip to New York. And in addition to, me going to my elementary school, my middle school, my high school in Brooklyn, the next day after we did that was we're going to start our journey with what I did that day. And I didn't start it on the homicide apprehension that started at 4 a.m. I actually started it at the diner, which is Tom's Diner on Washington Avenue in the 7-7. And the crazy thing is me taking my wife and my son, my 11-year-old son, for the first time through the 9/11 journey for me, because I never really got into it too deep with them. Ended up in a diner and being served by the same waiter. Last December, served me, my crate, and all of those guys back then. We had the same waiter in the diner on September 11th, 2001. Us on in December of 2024. Wow. And we had egg creams and we had pancakes and diner. Then we went to the 7-9. Then we went to the 9/11 memorial, and I walked him through when I felt he was finally of age to understand it and hear it. So when he knew that today's episode was this, he wanted to come and thank you guys.
Well,
he wanted to thank you.
That was very nice.
Tommy,
he doesn't know it yet, except he did say that he wants to be a police detective one day. Not a lieutenant, he wants to be a detective, like Joey Herb, McHale, Pete Forcelli. So,
before
my day started at 4 a.m. looking for a homicide perpetrator with a team of 6 detectives knocking on doors, doing the early morning hits that we do. We struck out. Couldn't find him. His nickname was Powerful. Don't remember his street name, because we all know his street name doesn't matter. Powerful is more important than his government issued name anyway, right? So we were in the diner, and I remember Matty Collins saying to me, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "No, I heard something, a vibration, whatever." He goes, "Yeah, it's like truck backfire or something." Dismissed it. We didn't think much of it. And then we got to the counter, and they were saying, "Did you hear a plane got hit, flew into the World Trade Center?" So we're like, "Holy shit, that's crazy, but it's happened before." So, small craft, whatever. And we paid our bill, and we went outside, and they said, "No, a second plane just hit the World Trade Center. We're being attacked." And everyone knew what it was. So we drove down to 256 Clawson Avenue, went to the housing development, and we were on the top, and we had the best view of the World Trade Centers from there. And we're like, "Okay, let's go. Let's get in there." And I said, "Guys, I was on my way in on a 4 to 12 to the 93 bombing, which Tom McCale responded to and was seriously injured. I remember all of Lower Manhattan and everything shutting down, including all of it. Like, I don't know how we're going to get there except for the 7-mile run from where we are now to there. So why don't we just put ourselves over the air that we're available? We'll put us in the queue and direct us. Tell us if you need 1 lieutenant, 1 sergeant, 6 detectives. Where do you want to go? What do you want us to do?" And so, of course, they didn't even acknowledge us because of everything else going on. Somehow or another, they told us, "Get back to command, put your uniforms on, and go stage at the communication center in downtown Brooklyn. They literally had us stage hundreds of lieutenant sergeants.
Pete, do you have audio?
No, I lost Tommy. I can't hear you.
Yeah.
Your mic dropped.
No.
Yikes. Technology, Tom. Technology. It's terrible.
Well, I'm pretty good at reading lips, so you can keep going.
Yeah. Smoke signals. Yeah.
No, not yet.
Nothing.
No.
My goodness. Murphy's Law strikes. It's terrible. I know Tommy was talking about that he brought his son to the museum until he comes back on, till we can hear him. I'll say this. I know a lot of cops don't like some of the folks that work at the museum. They feel that, they're a little too left of center, or that they won't let them bring guns on. But I'll tell you what, when I got interviewed by them, did you do that yet? Will you do your life story?
Yeah. The voices of 9/11 back.
Yeah, the woman, the historian, interviewed me, and it was funny. I talked about that paramedic or EMT that I saw die, and she got all choked up, and I was like, my story's not that different than anybody else she's heard. Like, why she's still choked up? Kind of threw me off. What it is that she knew about the EMT that was killed, knew her name and everything, didn't know exactly where she was killed. So, I mean, but the thought that I'm telling the story, she stops in the middle of the story and then literally runs off and gets the photo and comes back. I couldn't identify whether it was the person or not. Showed me that they really do a good job at documenting what happened that day. So I get it. There's some differences that they have with like being allowed to carry a gun on the site and all that stuff. But, they're passionate about telling the story.
Yeah. I have no issue with. Yep. Now we got
You're back. You're back.
All I did was plug in and unplug it. So go figure.
You're in and out. You're in and out.
Oh. All right. So what's the last thing you guys heard?
You're still in and out a little bit, Tommy.
Your audio's in and out, Tom.
Is it still in and out?
Now you're good.
Now we got.
Okay. What was the last thing you heard?
Didn't hear okay. Just didn't hear the O, but you heard the K.
No, I was telling you guys about where we were doing the hits and then breakfast and then getting assigned. What was the last thing you guys heard?
You were you was merging over to the communication center, the stage, and then shortly after that,
you were in a queue 7 miles to the site.
Right.
Yeah. So talking to our guys, like we can't get over there, so like let's just get in the queue. They sent us over, told us put uniforms on, and get into the communication center. Then they got a stage in communication. They have like 1,000 cops at like the communication center. So if that's a target, that's not good. So they eventually moved us. They figured that out. So we're moving everybody coming over the bridge through the tunnels. We got special trains, special buses moving everybody. People are walking over like zombies, covered in dust, covered in soot. I got detectives going to each hospital looking for unidentified people coming into the hospitals. Hey, someone's going to come in. They're injured. We don't know who they are. We got to find out who they are. We got to get them identified. Running missing person cases, pretty standard stuff for us, but the volume. Do you know nobody showed up at Woodhull? Nobody showed up at any of these hospitals, which was kind of interesting side story. But what happened that day at 2:00 in the afternoon. So now I've already worked on a homicide case. We struck out. The planes have hit. At 2:00 in the afternoon, we get notified from Lutheran Hospital. We're releasing a homicide perpetrator who's a hospitalized prisoner. You now have to rearrest him. And so we call the DA's office and we're like, look, everything going on. I don't want to rearrest this guy today. I call the hospital back. I tell the hospital, listen, we're not doing this today. And they're like, he's He's discharged. He's out of here. He's not our problem anymore. You got to take him. I then have to go down to the World Trade, the Lower Manhattan, where we're dealing. I take 2 detectives. I pull them back. I said, go back to the office. We have to process and rearrest the homicide suspect who was hospitalized for the last 30 days. Do that. So Richie Torres and Joe Pistocchi do that. And then through, again, the evacuation of Lower Manhattan, all the people coming across the bridges, all of the 11 o'clock at night, I get a call. Oh, Lieutenant, 79 Precinct, 4 Decatur Street, you got a male shot, likely to die. We respond, myself and 1 detective, and we handle a new homicide at 4 Decatur Street. A male by the name of a Polish immigrant, Henryk Sywiak, shot in the chest 1 time, 7 shell casings on the scene, 40 caliber. We got 1 Polaroid photo. We got 7 shell casings. We processed the crime scene in 30 minutes with an evidence collection guy, not a crime scene guy. And we handled the only homicide on 9/11 in addition to the World Trade Center efforts. So I handled 3 homicides, an apprehension attempt, then a rearrest, not me, but our squad did, and a new homicide in addition to the World Trade Center, all in the same day. So when I go to when the private sector people tell me they're having a bad day, I very politely tell them with the most sensitivity that I can possibly muster up, this is not a bad day. It's not a bad, and every single time I do that, they always say, you know what? I appreciate that. Let's put it into perspective. Nobody's hurt. Nobody's dead. Nobody's dying. Certainly not at the rate of over 3,000 people. So that's my 9/11 story. It's short. It's not sweet. It's horrible. But it's not even anything close to some of the things that you guys did and some other folks did. This is an episode we shared our stories. That's all it is. But that's a bad day. Like 3 homicides and in World Trade Centers is a pretty bad day. But
I'm looking forward to hearing Tommy McHale's story, because I'll tell you, one of the things, and forgive me, maybe I'm off base saying this, you hear a lot today about the 343, and absolutely deservedly so. You hear a lot about the NYPD and the 23. Sometimes I feel like the 37 are forgotten or not mentioned enough. You know, I mean, what was that? I think that's the largest loss of life of any police department in any one day.
Yes,
and
it is.
Rarely do you hear people mention the Port Authority. And I get it. You know, NYPD is such a behemoth of an organization. It's kind of like in the federal world. You hear so much about the FBI that you sometimes forget that there's other agencies. So I think there's a little bit of that at play here. But Tommy, I can't wait to hear your story. And I know that we lost 37 heroes from your old department on that day. And I certainly want to remember them when we remember the others.
I appreciate that, Pete. And yeah, you're right. You know, with that segue, you know, what we talked about earlier was the recent SEAL swim, you know, and what the hell's his name? Will Kane from Fox, you know, going live from the 9/11 wall at Liberty State Park. You know, of course, that have our members' names on it. And he goes on to mention, of course, the Navy SEALs, which it's the SEAL swim. So that, and then goes first responders, you know, FDNY, NYPD, and the New Jersey State Police. I'm sitting there, and I wanted to put my head through the television. I mean, like, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. You know, you really have. So and of course, other people heard of it as well. And you know, we the 3 of us know the state police weren't there, you know, when those towers came down, you know, so I contacted him on his social media. You know, I tried contacting him. I contacted Fox, the PBA the PBA PR guy. You know, he reached out to, you know, no apology, no response, you know, and I don't want to hear it was an oversight. You know, some people are quick to say that, Pete, like, you know, like you alluded to, you know, no, it's, you know, 24 years later, you know, and, you know, there's been slights before, you know, and I get upset, but could you imagine our families?
No, I couldn't.
You know, like initially, Moria Smith, the hero that she is, but then she's reported as the only female killed on 9/11. We had Captain Kathy Mazzakill, and I just learned from, again, speaking of Kathy, she started the defibrillator program in Port Authority. That's why we have defibrillators. She was, AMT or maybe even a nurse. I'm not sure, but she was in the medical field. She had heart problems when she was younger, which I just found out. But the first year of the defibrillator program saved 37 lives.
Wow. 37.
Yeah, I learned that from John Ryan, Chief John Ryan, Lieutenant John Ryan. I'm like, wow, that's but getting back to but can you imagine the Mazza family hearing this, and they lost their daughter, something as simple as people, and again, people just their hearts pouring out, as you mentioned on the, I wish every day was like September 12th. But they donate a dog statue to the first precinct. The only people to lose a police dog was Port Authority. Cyrus was killed, and you could see the World Trade Center command from the first precinct. But yet, the statue of the canine goes, and I mean, it may seem, I don't want to seem petty, the whole 9 yards, but it's aggravating when it, repeatedly happens, and 24 years later, it's still going on, it's frustrating. It's beyond frustrating, because like you said, the most officers killed in our country's history in a single event are the 37 Port Authority police officers who responded that day,
Yeah.
And I, for one, will never forget them. I knew most of them. And I was with some of them that day, but I will never let, and ironically, when Kane is doing this, the SEAL speaking in the background is Captain Ron Malloy, my partner from Afghanistan, to add insult to injury. So Ron speaking in the background, and when I hear this, but enough of that clown.
Yeah. So I want to make a comment. So Tom and I had an exchange on social media where Tom posted his disappointment in Will Kane, and I shared with him. I met Will Kane about 3 months prior in a LaGuardia Delta lounge, and I approached him, and we started talking, and we may or may not have shared a cocktail or two. And I thought he was genuine and sincere. So I told Tom, I said, you know what? I'm sure it was an oversight. And then he said, okay. And as he just told you, he reached out and nothing back. That disappoints me. That shows to me that these talking heads, these media folks, I'm going to go on the record right now for all podcasts before or after. I think the mainstream media is the biggest culprit in all of the evil and all of the divide that is going on with us at a very high level. We can get into the details at some other time, some other place. Absolutely. But I think the mainstream media is the worst offender, because if they did their job, this would not be happening. That said, so Tom, I'm going to publicly apologize to you. I thought Will Kane was better than that. I thought his team and his production crew was better than that. You should never forget. I'm sorry that it happened. I'm sorry I even tried to defend him. But if it's okay with you, if this is a good time, we're an hour and 15 in. So you shared a couple of photos. So if I can roll some photos and you can share with them. And what I don't think the audience also realized is you mentioned being an iron worker, but I've always told people, and I can't believe you mentioned the dogs too, that I'm a big dog lover. But the other thing that I always shared was like the real unsung heroes at 9/11 recovery and at the ground zero was the iron workers and the dogs. And the fact that we're going to talk both of those tonight really makes me happy, because I watched people 30 stories, 20 stories, whatever it was, on the iron doing their thing, and the dogs climbing into all of this stuff. So I know you're smiling, but in your heart, it's hurting. The iron workers kick ass. The fact that you're an iron worker and a cop that did this, and then I have a friend Dino Dinetti? Do you know Dino Dinetti?
I don't know. No.
Dino Dinetti is a fireman and an iron worker from Levittown, New York. Our kids played together for Little League and stuff. And he was another one of those dual heroes. So shout out to the iron workers. Shout out to the canines. Love the dogs. Tom, I'm going to do some pictures and some images. Let's do it.
You want me to comment on them, Tom?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So this is when after my first TDY to Afghanistan and Pakistan, I get home and the Ironworkers Local 40 are like, hey, we're taking down the last column and we want you to take down the flag. So, Willie Quinlan, who was one of the midnight foremen, I worked with both Jimmy Gaffney, Willie Quinlan, and Larry Keating. Larry has since passed away, young guy from a heart attack, which I believe is 9/11 related. But anyway, they hoisted me up and I had the honor of taking down the American flag as well as the ceremonial cut, taking the column down, passing the torch. I think it was in a front page of Newsday, I believe. But I just want to roll back, and I think you've seen the post again on LinkedIn with the recent hospital stay, and the doctors getting into how many times I was in CCU, blah, 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 ICU, whatever. So I go, well, initially 93, the Trade Center bombing, and he stops me mid-sentence. He goes, what bombing? I said, the World Trade Center was bombed in 1993. And he's like, oh, you mean before now? I go, yes. So he has an American doctor, went through all his schooling. And the first thing that jumped out at me was, like you were saying, Tom, you're teaching your son, which I think is admirable. So here's a doctor that went through all the schooling in the U.S. and was never taught about the 93, about terrorism as it affects the United States. And that's what jumped out at me. When you mentioned that, I just had to throw that out there. That I was like, and the other two doctors that were with him, I don't think they knew about it either, because they were just as they had that dumbfounded look on their faces when I was giving them the history of my illnesses. But so yeah, it's got to be taught.
Yeah, it's crazy. That we ran a program at the 9/11 Memorial Museum for ATF. It was a leadership program, and the way it would start is we would always ask everybody, "Where were you on 9/11?" And for the most part, hey, I was on an Air Force base. They were veterans that joined ATF after their service, or I was a cop here, or I was an agent here. Towards the end of my time at ATF, we started hearing, well, I was in kindergarten. And these are people who are supervisors at ATF. It's a supervisor's course, kindergarten. We're now hiring people into law enforcement who weren't even born on September 11th, if you think about that. So you're entirely correct, Tom. We need to keep people informed about what happened, and not just on 9/11, but at the earlier attack, and some of the other things our country's been through. Because hey, man, I am a firm believer in the old adage that those who are not aware of history are bound to repeat it. And like I said, I bang this drum all the time. When I look at how our elected leaders, show up at Ground Zero every year and shed a tear and talk about the heroism of the police and the firefighters, and then you see them the very next day, talking about defund the police and the police are bad. You got to remember, these are evil, deceitful people, some of them. Some of them are genuine, but some of them will say anything to get a vote, and they are just vile, despicable people. And I would love to see our society get to the place where we start weeding out the crap and only elect people who really give a shit about this country and the people who live here. I don't know how long that'll take, but it would be nice.
Let me share an ATF agent story with Pete. So we come across the vault, a weapons vault, and we had the big boxes that are attached to the crane, just skids, and so once we know we're in a vault, and again it's all iron workers, and some PA cops, it's okay. So we notify the Port Authority command post and blah blah blah, and so like, okay, we need an ATF agent here. So this female agent shows up with like these high heels, and we all have the shoe covered the whole 9 yards. Well, she walked across that iron as if I wanted to get her an ironworker's book. I'm like, if you can walk across the iron in those heels, and she does. She goes from, from like West Street all the way to the ATF building where she's like, it's like, she's okay, put them in a box, and so we boxed them all up. We'll put them in the skip and shift it over to where they can she had an ATF team to unload them. But she walked across all that debris and all in freaking high heels.
Wow. Yeah, I think that was Maggie Fagan, and her husband was a Jersey City cop, I believe. Yeah, and her father was an NYPD cop that also became an ATF agent, which is kind of weird because she always liked me, and that's why. She goes, you remind me of my father, because I was 15 years with NYPD, then jumped ship. Yeah, she's the real deal. She was good people.
Yeah, she we were, truth be told, we were like, oh well, look at this. Where did she think she's going? Boom. There she went.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I mean, Willie Quinlan's crew. That's me in the blue shirt on the left. That's just one column. Would be from 55 to 65 ton. Just and when and as you can see, you can't see, but you know how high the pile was. When we talk about injuries, and I testified before the congressional committee about the subcommittee, and there's one doctor there, and he's no bedside manner, but very direct, which I appreciated. He was like, oh, the mask, and I'm like, well, doc, I go, the crane operators were operating in a blind. You know what that is? So I explained to them what operating in a blind is. They can't see where to load. They're picking up the whole 9 yards. And so we're on radios on the other side of a mountain of steel and debris and concrete and all. And there's thousands of first responders, that have no idea once that 55, 65 ton column is freed. We call it being on the American side. If you're between the column and the crane, that's not the American side. If that column comes in, it's going to kill. So I said, if we had a mask on, talking on a radio to a crane operator, how does this sound? I said it's not going to work. So I said, no, we didn't have masks on. Even if we did have them, we couldn't use them and safely direct the crane operator on how to pick the load up and all. And then of course, when we crawled into the little crevices that we crawled into, the rabbit holes, they either got knocked off or, they would just, you would lose it going in and coming out of the rabbit holes that we went into, the crevices that led to, bigger holes and we did some recoveries that way.
Yeah. The other thing a lot of people don't know if they weren't down there, and maybe some people have forgotten, is remember they had the engineers there with the transit levels watching. They'd fixate on a part of the building and just watch. And if something shifted, they would blow those horns and everybody had to run because they were afraid a second collapse was coming. I remember plenty of times where something would move and then it was like people scurrying for their lives.
Yeah. I did a presentation. You stole a little bit of my thunder. Early on, no, maybe the 12th and all. In fact, Austin Explosion came in and joined us. John Faust and his crew. But anyway, there was a transit, a MTA engineer with the transit, an engineering transit, and that's when they kept blowing the horns that the Millennium Hotel was going to fall. Mm-hmm. They would blow the horns, and guys were getting hurt. So I asked the MTA engineer, I'm like, who are you assigned to? He says, nobody. I go, and of course I know what a transit is. We use them with the iron plumbing up a building. I'm like, right. Well, do me a favor, shoot that building and you let me know if that, and that's what he did. So he shot the building. A fire chief walks over, says, no, you guys can't, be in here. That I go, Chief, that thing hasn't moved an inch, and the engineer's like, no, he was like, oh, well, who sent you? He goes, MTA just told me to come down here, and I quickly recruited that guy and he was in my team. And, but yeah, that alleviated us every time they blew that horn running off the pile. And what a pain in the ass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But anyway, so on 9/11, I was in the Major K squad. That's another picture of me cutting steel,
So is that the ironworker or the cop?
Both. What happened was, cops aren't fixers. They're told like nobody comes through. So I would be, in my ironwork capacity, and a jib, a piece of the crane would be coming down if we had to extend the boom or put a jib on. And of course, the cop is just listening to his order. Nobody gets through. So the company, whether we're, AMEC or whatever, would call and say, the crane's stuck on, West Street, I'm like, okay. So I would walk down and then take out my shield and say, hey, officer, yeah, I'm Detective McHale. Okay. And then, so I would just switch hats, for something like that, but yeah, it worked, it worked both ways, there's actually a documentary. I was in one for 93, and the producer, the director, Rachel McGuire, she came back and wanted to do another. She thought, first of all, she checked with my wife to see if I made it out, and luckily, of course, I did. But then she wanted to do another one, on police and fire, and I said, hey, Rachel, no, nobody's doing anything about the iron workers. So they did, and it was called Medal of Honor, METAL of Honor.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, they did a nice documentary on that, and Pete, to allude to you, they just didn't do the guys who went down there and worked and all. They also did the guys who came down and couldn't go back, which I thought was interesting, because not everybody could deal with it, So I'm like, I'm glad that they showed, it's the human side of it that, yeah, there are those who just couldn't return, but yeah, that's a decent documentary. But on 9/11, I was assigned to the major case squad in addition to the JTTF in Newark, and I was at the major case office, which was on the 11th floor at 1PP at that time. And I was with Tom Nerney and John O'Boyle, and Detective John O'Boyle and Tom Nerney, and we heard the plane come in, but we could see, when we looked out the window, we could see the gaping hole in the Tower 1, Now, even though it was on a JTTF, and even though I was survived the 93 bombing and all, terrorism, believe it or not, did not jump into my head right away. I can't say that it did. I'm like, I can't say it didn't, but I don't remember saying, oh, we're being attacked, So we jumped in my bureau car, and Tom, John, and I, we rushed over to the Trade Center. Like you, Pete, we get there, right after the first plane hit. And I introduced Tommy and John to Bobby Corfus, Sergeant Bobby Corfus. And I didn't know that there was a daycare center there. And John O'Boyle asked about the kids in the daycare, and Bobby Corfus says, no, my guys got them out already, And again, I didn't even know that, unfortunately, Bobby gets called over to 2 Tower, where the collapse takes his life, But there's a video out there of Evan Fairbanks, who was filming for a church, whatever, but he came into the police command, the Port Authority, the Port Authority had their World Trade Center command. You guys call it a precinct, Port Authority calls it commands. But so I go into the command, and I get a radio, and this individual is filming. John McLaughlin is behind me getting dressed. John's one of the guys that we rescue later on. He's pulled out alive along with Will Himeno. And there are a couple other guys who didn't make it, who are on the same video. But when we go out to the plaza, and actually one of the chiefs from inside, he asks what the explosions are, and this is where all these nitwits for the 9/11 conspirators that have an inside job, bombs report, but it was actually the body is exploding on impact, hitting the plaza, and sadly, the eaves that you talked about, Pete, people who were coming down from 1 and 2 Tower, seen us with a steady stream of people evacuating through 5 World Trade Center, rather than stay under the eave, they tried darting across the plaza where the globe is. Unfortunately, only to get hit with debris or a body, and that was, that was horrifying. That was absolutely horrifying. But So, I was inside 5 when Tower 2 came down. One article says, after the second tower collapsed. No, it was Tower 2, so it was the first tower to collapse. I was inside 5 World Trade, and John O'Boyle says we went out through the broken window of bought his books. I thought we went out through the doors, but hey, I don't know. But we got, all we seen was hundreds and hundreds of small tornadoes, debris tornadoes. I mean, hundreds of them.
Right.
It looked like a science fiction movie. All and then of course, prior to that, there's an individual with a severely broken arm on the plaza, walking around saying he's the fire warden, on the floor fire warden. He thinks he's on the floor. So Tom McCale takes him out to off the plaza, and he kind of struggles with Tommy a little bit. Tommy loses his shield, only to be turned into my buddy Steve Theophanis in the first precinct, and he gets it back to us later on. But that's just one of the crazy things that happened that day. But so that's when I lose sight of Tommy. He takes this injured individual out to EMS on Vesey Street or Church Street, and the guy doing the video, he leaves the police desk with Jimmy Wheeler and John Fitzgerald, 2 detectives. And as soon as he gets out to the street, he leaves us. As soon as he walks out to the street, he pans up, and he actually films 2 coming down on him. So he actually ducked either under a fire truck or I don't know Evan's full story, but he actually stands there while the tower was coming down on him. But he did capture a number of our guys who we lost on that video. But so I get outside. I become one of the dust people. Like you said, your eyelids are closed, and they wash my somebody washes my eyes out with the Snapple iced tea.
Better than nothing, right?
It's what you had available. You use what you got.
Exactly. So we get into 99 Church Street, and you'll appreciate this, Tom, being the boss. So we get into 99 Church Street. No, I'm in I'm one of the dust people in a suit, back and forth. We tripped over a body going up. We come back. We get a door, and we carry the deceased on the door and bring him into 99 Church Street and put him off to the side, rather than leave him in the street. NYPD boss comes in, and at some point he goes, "Who made this a temporary morgue?" Which nobody made anything yet. We just wanted, but without hesitation, the other 2 detectives they point at me. I'm like, yeah, okay, it's a temporary. I go, we just wanted to get him out of the street, but you guys would know what that means. Everything has to have a label or but so that I go back now. I can't find Ernie. I go back to the again, 1 tower still standing, and I see then just before that comes down in '93, when I told you I had the intermission where I was in the World Trade Center Command, told my wife I'm going to the hospital. Unfortunately, I stayed there doing what I did. So my wife at that time is calling all the New York hospitals looking, and they're like, no, she's hearing all sorts of rumors. So I'm unaccounted for until early the next morning. So my wife and my oldest one remembers that, and she went through hell trying to see if I was alive or dead from '93. Fast forward 9/11, we have the alphanumeric pages. My oldest one, Dad, please check in, please let us know, back and forth. So as you remember, Pete, there's no cell phones working.
Right.
I go out to the payphone, and when I go out to the payphone to call the 800 number, 1 tower comes down. So, but that page, that page saved my life. So now I'm still looking for Nerney and O'Boyle now, and Chief Ali comes up, and Chief Ali knew that I worked with Tommy, so I report Nerdy and Boyle missing, and Ali was like super upset. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, it was just a natural reaction. Being that two of his guys that he knows are missing. I'm like, I don't know where they're at. And I learned that Tommy, was at the morgue later on, alive and well. And of course, John, somebody contacted my wife, and I learned that John had survived as well. But so we continued, doing what we can to try and find people and all, which of course we came up empty. And then we find out about Will Himeno and John McLaughlin. So this is going on into the evening. ESU, New York City ESU and FD are down in the hole after the Marine, finds them. And, I'm just getting material up and equipment, whatever they call for. We have the line going up. It comes a point where they're talking about amputating Will Himeno's leg. And at first they said, we're taking him to 1010 Firehouse. I'm like, no, 1010's decimated. It's not, and there was a triage at One Liberty. So this, I don't know what he was. He's in the medical field, and he's like, no, we're going to 1010. So I sent one of my cops up to One Liberty to bring a surgeon down. And they're like, no, he of course he overruled this medical person, whether it was an EMT, paramedic, whatever. And we get Will out, and that's where Danny Gardner comes in. Danny's a burly guy, and we needed to clear a path. We have Will on a gurney, and Danny does the blocking all the way up Liberty Street, to get Will into One Liberty, and then he's transferred to Bellevue. And my car was destroyed in a collapse. So Danny wanted to drive. Danny Gardner wanted to drive me home at like 4 o'clock in the morning. I wasn't there for the recovery of McLaughlin. I passed out, and I was brought home, and then got there the following day, and was involved in the recovery of Dominic Pizzullo. One of the first recoveries I did was Pizzullo. And the other one, which you see me mention a couple of times, was, and I sent you the picture, was Christopher Amorosa. Mm-hmm. And Chris's picture, you see it was in the Daily News. Chris has an injury to his face, a burn and all. Chris saves this woman who, unfortunately, with social media, pregnant. No, she was not pregnant. There he is there. Yeah, she was not pregnant. She was an adult. I actually found her son, talked to the son and all, and she had adult children at the time. She had severe asthma. So Chris saves this woman who's alive today and a grandmother. And as you see, there's no Scott air pack on him. I was on Chris's recovery where we cut off the harness to the Scott air pack. So that means after this picture is taken with Chris, and Chris has 2 years on a job, counting his academy time. So he's out in the field, a year plus, right? So here he is, 29 years old, saves this woman, goes back in. He's injured himself, so you can see. He dons a Scott air pack and continues in the rescues until a collapse takes his life. And and when people say, "Oh, hero here," I'm like, there's not multiple definitions for the word hero. There's only one, and that's it right there. Mm-hmm. It's just, I didn't know Christopher. I always, post, Chris, continue to watch over us, but he's one of our 37, and it was his, along with me, it was his classmates and friends that recovered him and removed him from the site.
Wow. Yeah, that's heroism. That's for sure. Unbelievable.
Yeah. So after 10 days of down at the site and Port Authority capacity, the decision is made that I have to go back to the JTTF, which I understand. I didn't agree with at the time, but hey, I'm just a shit willy. I got to do what I'm told, right? So, I go back to the JTTF in Newark, but my mind and soul are at the site. So I start working, and we're doing 12-hour shifts. So I do 12 hours at the JTTF, leave, go over to the site, work 12 hours, and then back to the JTTF for 12, and then go home. So I was doing like 36 hours straight, I did that, for, well, at one point I was beyond exhausted, and luckily my JTTF partner, Kevin Tormey, state trooper, he went to the FBI nurse, and he's like, this knucklehead's not stopping, he's going to kill himself. And so Mary Jane Riley, she's real tough, nurse, she came up and she's like, give me the keys to the car. She's, you're going home. I don't want to hear about it. I don't care about what you're forced to do, the whole 9 yards. So they drove me home and, put me to bed, where I recharged the batteries and then went back to doing what I was doing, But, you had good people like that looking out for you. But I also.
So Tom, can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
So you shared a photo with police officer Robert Kalfers.
Coffers, yeah, Bobby Coffers.
Okay, Kalfers. But before I do that, I just want to say this is the tavern, and I did have to, and it took 11 episodes for me to interrupt in the middle, and I had to do a bio break. So sorry about that, guys. So
that's all right.
But it's the
Nature
tavern,
calls, brother. Nature calls.
and
We're getting old. Our prostates are enlarged.
Sure.
Yeah.
So so that being said, you shared a couple stories, and then what I'd like to do, Pete, because I have the NYPD, the Port Authority, the state courts, because Jimmy Sheehan. Tom, you know Jimmy Sheehan in New Jersey?
Sure do.
You know him? Is he? We'll talk about him offline. We'll make him watch this. He got all upset because nobody acknowledged the state court officers. So we'll do that. And then we'll do the other investigators, because we should acknowledge all the Leos. I want to bring up the NYPD. I want to bring up the Port Authority. I want to bring up those. And I would like to talk to you guys about who you knew personally and hear about those stories, a quick little story.
Sure.
But you shared this picture with me, so I don't know why, but let's hear it.
Well, Bob, when I talked about robbing at the World Trade Center, this is the sergeant I introduced to Tom Nerney and John O'Boyle, and Bobby had his guys already evacuate the daycare. That was already done before we even got there, and Bobby was killed in the south when he leaves us and goes over to the South Tower, and he's killed in the South Tower. Bobby and I worked together a path as cops. Hysterical guy. He would write parodies of of people, including he did one for me for my promotion, but he would have a way of getting underneath the boss's skin sometimes. Tom, you could allude to that. But I mean, he was just so quick-witted and a really funny guy, and. But yeah, we lost Bobby that day, but he had, and when I looked at him, and because he was there in '93 as well, he's like, like here we go again, and I'm like, yeah, let's get to it, and yeah, I miss him. Your audio's out again, Tom.
He's muted. Tommy, you're muted. You're muted, brother.
You're muted.
Go ahead, Pete.
You were muted. I couldn't hear you. What you want me to talk about? Who I knew? The guys I knew well?
Yeah. Let me pull that up. We'll do the NYPD, and then we'll do the Port Authority. And then we'll acknowledge the state and the other Leos that were lost that day, because we don't want to forget. what I also found fascinating in the research for getting this podcast together was there's no one single source that is you can really rely on for this. Like, it's unbelievable because they kind of confuse, the day of the incident versus not, and then the names, and then it's fascinating to me. And it just shows that no one has really ever taken effort. Even OM, Officers Memorial down page, like, they do a great job, but like, because I'm sure it's a nonprofit and it's not funded by any corporation and it's not making any money, it's not getting the attention it deserves. And so the people who are behind the scenes on OMPD, OMDP, thank you for all you do behind the scenes. But like, it was like not easy to curate all the data. So that being said, here's our 23 NYPD people that we lost. I have 2 personal friends on this list. Pete, I know you have a couple more. I have met and I had interactions with many of these people, but I had 2 personal friends that I worked with closely. Go ahead, Pete. I'm going to do yours. I'll talk about my 2, and then we go to the Port Authority page for Tom.
Sure. I knew Vigiano and Fazio from the Columbia Association, so I knew those guys from the functions, the barbecues and whatnot. I didn't know them super well, but I knew them enough that considered them friends. The guys I knew really well, frankly, was John Coughlin, who's top left there. When I first showed up out of the academy to PSA 8, John was one of the patrol sergeants there, one of the people that welcomed me to the prison. Huge guy, massive. He was a piper for the pipe band. Just a good, gentle giant sort of guy. So I knew him very well. Vinny Dans went through the academy with Vinny. He was in a company that was a sister company of ours. So, he was in company 8702. I was in 8704. Then we went through Operation Pressure Point together, worked together on a daily basis, tried out for ESU, myself with Vinny and John Coughlin. And let me tell you, that weighed heavily on me too. I got weeded out for fear of heights. And I had wondered, like, had I not been such a punk and not been able to climb the Verrazano Bridge with those guys, would I have been there with them on 9/11? So, those things pop through your head when you talk about survivor's guilt. Walter Weaver, who's bottom towards the left, was a young cop when I was a detective in the 4-7, and he loved watches. And back in those days, I had a couple of Breitlings and an Omega, and he used to come up and just talk about watches with me all the time. Vinny, like I said, Academy classman. If I saw Vinny Dans, it was a hug. It was never a handshake. Little guy, former Marine, always a smile on his face, just a heart of gold. And then finally, Ray Suarez. Ray Suarez was in my academy class in my company. He got hired at the oldest age at the time you get hired, which I think might have been 34 or 20. I don't know what the age was then, back in 1987. The dude was a stud, man. He was in great shape, was a beast in the gym, but just a good-hearted, solid dude. So those are the ones I knew well. And then there's another guy, like I said, Danny Harlan, who was an NYPD cop that jumped ship and became a fireman. So he's obviously not there. Work with him on a daily basis. So it's hard, man. To lose 7 good friends in one day is something I was never, ever prepared for. I guess soldiers deal with that kind of grief all the time, but as a cop, I never had to, So those are the ones I knew.
Yeah, I knew Jimmy Leahy from the 6th, not well, but I was very tight with the guys in the 6th precinct. And then Danny Richards, Claude Richards, from the bomb squad, because Michael Mixon and Mike Walsh, my 2 good friends who I was with on 9/11 that day as well. And I thought Michael Mixon bought the farm, and when the bomb squad vehicle came back, and I was getting cleaned up in that as well. I thought, I said to Sergeant Walsh, we call Mixon Sluggo. I'm like, I don't think Sluggo made it, and I hear from the back of the bomb, no, I'm all right, and it's all Mixon in the back of a bomb squad vehicle. So thank God he met, but he was with Kevin Barry, and when the second plane came in, and somebody reported, believe it or not, a missile from the Woolworth building. So I'm actually on the radio. I go out and I speak to Kevin Barry and Mixon. They're like, no, it was a commercial jetliner came in. So I put over the air that no, it was definitely a commercial plane, back and forth. But yeah, so I was in Danny's company a number of times.
Yeah. So I have two people that I worked with very closely for a period of time on this list right here. P.O. Stephen Driscoll. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I thought my microphone might have cut out again, but I was told by Ron Layson and Eric Dim to get a microphone, and I probably didn't get the one they got, but I did get a specialized microphone, and it seems to not be the better deal. But anyway, Stephen Driscoll. I was a telephone message over to the disorder control unit right after the merger, and we did a top cops training, scenario-based training, tactical, save your life, don't do anything stupid, don't get yourself in trouble, do not get engaged in crossfire, and how do you handle high-level threat engagements. And myself and the Killer Bees, Tom, that I was talking to you about from District 2, Barry and Brosnan, Don Barry and John Brosnan, look, Ron Layson's like, I sent you a link. Like, yeah, well, I don't have an unlimited budget. Ron Layson does. Like, that guy can buy anything. He's buying property all over the country. He's a real estate mogul. So anyway, we went to this training, and we were the first. I was a sergeant. We had two cops, and we just did a really good job. And they said, listen, we're doing this disorder control training, top cops training, tactical. You guys did great. Why don't you stay here for the rest of the summer as we develop this pilot program? And so it was in that program that I met Stephen Driscoll, who was a Bronx cop at the time. And we used firearms that were shooting blanks. And Stephen Driscoll, who eventually went into ESU and perished at 9/11, that guy worked so hard. He was one of those detached guys because he was so good tactically, and he was so good at the things he needed to do from a patrol cop's perspective. And he also knew how to reload blanks, that he was there. And it's like, I'm going to stay here 3 hours on my own time, 4 hours on my own time, every single night, and do reloads. Because when we do these scenarios, it's that important. This is why it's important for people to understand that Stephen Driscoll and cops in general who really care about this profession and care about protecting the community, which is our goal, and protecting our country, that we will go above and beyond, like Tom McCale has done, like Pete Forcelli has done, and sacrificed comfort and easy goings to do what's right for our communities and our country. And Stephen Driscoll is one of those guys because he stayed every day to make sure we were doing the tactical things to protect ourselves. And then those scenarios evolved into engagements with criminals and defendants and complainants and all sorts of really great training. And of course, it went into borough-based training, and it was a disaster after that. And we won't talk about that right now. But Stephen Driscoll dedicated his time and gave away hours and hours of his family life for top cops training in that summer of post merger. I say acquisition because I'm corporate now, but post merger. And then Rodney Gillis, Sergeant Rodney Gillis, who was a brand new sergeant in the 7-7 precinct. I was a brand new lieutenant. He was a brand new sergeant. And we did our first 6 months learning, for me, how to be a lieutenant, for him, how to being a sergeant. I could not have asked for a better brand new sergeant to help me as a brand new lieutenant. What a great guy, squared away, top notch, like just all about the business process, military guy, total, like that was his demeanor. And he was such a good guy, such a gentleman. And I worked 6 months with him really closely. I learned how to be a lieutenant. I helped him how to learn how to be a sergeant, and we got along really good. And when I was in the 7-9 squad as a lieutenant, and we had high threat, high level entries, and we would call ESU to do those entries, it was not uncommon for Driscoll and Rodney Gillis to be on those scenes. And what a feeling of relief I had that those two guys were going to do our entry and then clear the apartment. And then the detectives in the suits and the hats and the trench coats come in and clean up and do all that stuff. And I appreciated those guys so much. And I'm going to get choked up again because, I mean, those two guys were the salt of the earth, great cops through and through, bleeding blue. And I miss them terribly. And I wish I knew them longer. And that's my experience with the two people. I've met a few of these people on this list right now multiple times, but I didn't have that level of interaction and engagement with them. But that's my story on who died and where we lost on the day of 9/11.
Hey, Tom, as I told you prior, we were offline. I was on Stephen Driscoll's recovery, because I, working. They called me like the undercover ironworker, because I was with the fire department team, and then they actually found his air bottle first with the 4 on it, and they're like, okay, it's just port authority. Like, no, it's probably truck 4. Anyway, I along with your ESU worked on Stephen's recovery, and it was one of the more difficult recoveries that I did. As far as freeing the bodies up from what they were entwined with, as far as the steel. The other one was one of our guys, Antonio Rodriguez, which we didn't know until after we had him fully uncovered that we knew who he was. But we were at an event in the Bronx. I believe it was Honor Nerney, and Stephen Driscoll's mother was there. She knew every detail of Stephen's recovery. And then I heard the story that she insisted on going to the morgue to see him. And I think it went to Chief Espo, and he's like, you got to let it go. So I believe, I'm not 100% positive, but I believe Mrs. Driscoll actually went to them. She's like, I gave birth to him, but she wrote me a beautiful letter about Stephen. She sent me the fireman statue, of the flag raising.
Yeah.
How she found out about this, I have no idea. A female detective approached me at the event and said, are you Tom McCale from Port Authority? I go, yes. Mrs. Driscoll wants to meet you. I'm like, so I was like, wow. But yeah, she knew every detail of Stephen's recovery. I mean, it was filmed by Taru, but I know she didn't get it from watching the Taru tape. She was a strong Irish woman. God bless. She has since passed. Her and her husband, but she was a tough woman, boy.
Yeah.
God bless.
So Steve Driscoll. So I'm gonna reach out on this podcast. He may or may not be online right now. If he watches it later, if not, Ron Layson can. Rob Lukesh, like we used to call him Drip, and if I'm not mistaken, there is actually a memorial on one of the trucks up in 3 that calls him Steve, quote, Drip, unquote, Driscoll, because that freaking guy used to sweat so much. And I remember him leaning over and loading those friggin' cartridge cases, and the nose and the sweat was beating down and it would drip off his nose. And I remember that. We never called him Drip. But then when he went to ESU, we're like, oh, they call him Drip. And I was like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense, So anyway, what a great guy. Oh, my God, I miss him. I miss them all, obviously, but the ones that I knew, Rodney and Steve. So Tom, thanks for sharing that story about Steve and the Driscoll. let's pull up unless you have anything else to say, let's pull up the Port Authority guys and let's hear a little personal story. Who's on here? Who's on this list? Tom.
Well, right at 12 o'clock is our director, Superintendent of Police Fred Marone. What a character. I mean, there was the fights that go on between the federal agencies and the whole 9 yards. So allegations are made against me about insubordination, this, that, back and forth and all, which is borderline. I wouldn't say insubordination, but straightening a boss out, I had no problem doing it. Anyway, I get called to his office, and he's like, is this true? I go, absolutely not. He goes, that's all I need to know. And that was it. He had my back 100%. Below him is our chief of department, Jimmy Ramito. Same thing. These two guys when I was doing the homicides of the cops, and with the Freddie Hilton, when I uncovered that there was an unsolved in Atlanta that they didn't know about, and I had the case.
No, I know about Freddie Hilton. I know we're gonna get to that next episode.
I know, but it was these two guys who gave me the helicopter that we could travel around and get the witnesses' corroborating statements to get the murder indictment on Hilton for the 1971 homicide of Green. And Hilton knew why we were there when we went to talk to him at Rikers, because they let him know. And I'm a firm believer that if he would have made bail and got out, and we trigger locked him, we had the ATF trigger lock him so we can until we got the murder indictment. But if Director Marone and Chief Ramito didn't give me the helicopter to travel throughout the Eastern Seaboard to interview these guys, I'm a firm believer Freddie Hilton would be in Cuba with Chesmod right now. So, and I'm, Kathy Mazes to the right. She's a captain who started the defibrillator program. Bob Seary, lieutenant, is next to Kathy. So on the right inner column. Juergens is below right of Seary. Now, Paul Juergens I didn't know Paul, but his cousin was one of the court officers that were killed. So, the family lost Paul from us, and, J.D. Levi is on the right side going down. He worked at the bus terminal. Good man. Jimmy Nelson, next to J.D. I work with Jimmy as well. A great guy. He was head of the Hibernians at one point. When I got the Medal of Valor from the Hibernians, Jimmy gave that to me, along with Tommy Gorman, who's on a poster as well. Dominic Puzzulo is next on the left side. On the right column, left side, that's the first recovery I made. I was on the team with Massachusetts Task Force 1, who did the actual recovery of Dominic. Parham, I did not know Jimmy Parham. And Antonio Rodriguez is below the bald head on the left. That's the other difficult recovery I did down there. I did not know Antonio. Rodriguez on the right, he was one of our pipe band drummers. I was on his recovery as well. Al Niedermeyer is below, just the bottom row, right? I should say the second row from the bottom on the right. Mustaches, Al Niedermeyer. Worked with Al, not a lot, but I knew Al. Next to him is Joe Novice, my classmate, a great guy. Jay, third from the right is Jay Lennon. Jay was one of the cops that broke me in, and my wife and his sister-in-law knew each other since they're like 10 years old, and we're in touch with the Lennon family a lot today. Paul Lazinski is next to him. Love motorcycles, and his daughter just posted a nice picture of Paul on Facebook. In the middle, on the bottom, the second row from the bottom that's Tommy Gorman, also in the Hibernians. With I knew Tommy well and friends with his family as well today. Next to him with the mustache is is Greg Froner. Greg was also from PATH. We lost 13 guys from the PATH precinct. My former command. Greg was a funny guy. Loved his what the hell you call him again? The flannel shirts. He thought he thought that was a fashion statement, wearing the flannel shirts. Liam Callahan next to him, another pipe band member, PATH command. Great guy, Liam. Mo Barry next to him, PATH command. Christopher Amoroso, who we spoke of earlier. And then the very bottom is to the right is Jimmy Lynch, World Trade Center. I didn't know Jimmy that well. Guns of Houston, I did not know. Then there's I can't see the picture too clear on the third one. I don't know if it's Webb or it's hard to see from the
Nathaniel Webb.
Okay, yeah, he was on. I worked with him at the Holland Tunnel, a couple of years. And who's next to Webb? I can't.
Yeah,
it's hard. It's hard to see from the screen. I don't want to touch the screen and ruin it either.
Yeah, don't. Yeah, it's fine. You're fine.
But Kenny Teagan, I didn't know Kenny I didn't know Kenny at all. But again, his family, and Davis, I did not know him. Donnie McIntyre, second from the right on the bottom. I broke Donnie in as a cop. Great guy. I'm close with his family today. I actually used Donnie's cuffs overseas, and we'll get to that. But on Abu, I didn't cuff Abu Zubaydah, but the special forces with the Pakistanis did, but other terrorists have worn Donnie's handcuffs when I was over in Pakistan and Afghanistan. So I took his cuffs that were recovered from the Trade Center. His wife gave them to Paul Nunziato, our PBA. Then he was Donnie's partner, becomes PBA president. Paul gave them to me. I took them overseas, and then the Pakistani ISI at the first anniversary, the first year that everybody's going on a wall, your guys, our guys, the court officers, they're in DC, the Pakistani ISI guys, and the colonel from ISI actually returns the handcuffs to Donnie's widow, Janine McIntyre, wow, at the memorial. Wow. Dave Lamonge at the bottom. I did not know Dave, but he was from New Jersey, also I believe a paramedic. Going up above Amorosa is Bruce Reynolds. Bruce was also a Hibernian. Used to march in the St. Patty's Day parade with a green shamrock painted on the top of his head and underneath his hat. Nathaniel Webb, another senior guy, Holland Tunnel. John Scalar on the left. I didn't know John that well. I didn't know John at all. McHale, I knew him just not well, but met him a couple of times. Then you have Steve Hutchko. I work with Steve at Newark Airport and close with his family today. Steve's son is on the job now, Port Authority. Also a sergeant, also in a pipe band. He's a drummer. And Donald Foreman. I work down with the Holland Tunnel. And Howard, I did not work with Howard. He was a JFK guy, but he President Bush carries his badge today.
Oh wow!
Yes, his mother gave the shield to George Bush, and he carries the shield today. Bobby Corvus, who I spoke about earlier, and from PATH also, and last but not least, Inspector Anthony Infante, who was my CO at PATH he was a captain at PATH when I was down there. But I knew Tony pretty well. But yeah, those are our guys and girl, and of course Cyrus is not on there, our canine, But I think we've lost 18 since then through illness. I'm not positive on that number, but I believe it's 18.
Yeah.
Growing.
Sadly, the list is long on the illnesses. So, Pete, you want to jump in? Is there anything else you want to add on some of the people you knew, the friends you lost on that day? Because what I then want to do is then go through, because like Tom brings up a really interesting point with the Will Kane situation. I'm not going to forget anybody, so I'm going to read the roll call for all of these lost, including the Fed and the state police. But I know you wanted to talk about some other folks. Did you get everything you want to get in, or do you got more?
No, I got it in, man. I mean, like I said, everything I had to say was true. Just sad, man. I mourn them. And like I said, man, the thing that troubles me is you see the numbers just keep going up and up and up. People I field train, people I work with, they're still dying. And then you wonder when is our name added to that list? Because it's like the movie Final Destination. You feel like death is chasing you, which kind of sucks. But no, that's all I had to say. Just sad to lose so many good people.
Yeah. So the sick list of folks that have contracted 9/11 related illnesses are just so extensive, and it's unbelievable. We could spend a lot of time on that. Today's episode is about being on 9/11, 2 days from now, and we did that. What I wanted to do today was share the stories of the New York City police officers I knew, Tom's Port Authority cops, which he did. I'm going to read and can stay on. The listeners can stay on, but I'm going to read them all because they all need to be said out loud. But this is for Jimmy Sheehan because he was upset because there was some acknowledgement, which he's correct, is that there were 3 New York State court officers. I believe Juergens and Wallace were posthumously promoted. I'm not 100% sure on that. But Sergeant Thomas Juergens, Captain William Thompson, and Sergeant Michael Wallace were lost on 9/11, doing 9/11 response and recovery efforts that day. And then New York City Fire Department, or FDNY, Fire Department of New York, Fire Marshal Ron Bucca, which is probably, I don't know exactly the civil service, but designated as a fire marshal. So he is technically now a sworn law enforcement officer. And I've had nothing but phenomenal experiences with the fire marshals of the Fire Department of New York City. I had a triple on Green Avenue in a 7-9. I had Ashley Sims, which I did on an earlier podcast with the fire marshals. I've had nothing but the most phenomenal experiences with the fire marshals. They were so great. So Ron Bucca, we miss you and we'll never forget you. And then the federal agents, we have Special Agent Leonard Hatton of the FBI. Pete, you mentioned him earlier. And then Master Special Police Officer Craig Miller of the U.S. Secret Service. So I think that is what has been the final tally of all of the law enforcement officers lost on that day. Not subsequent, but lost on that day. So I'll go back to you guys. Any comments on that?
No, man. Like I said, the numbers are just astonishing. And, all we can do is, pray that God holds each of them close. And look, the other heroes too. The people who were in that building who didn't wear a uniform, who could have walked out of that building, but encountered somebody who was disabled or hurt and decided, hey, I'm not going to leave you, buddy. I'm going to stay with you, and perished. I mean, the heroism there, it's not just those like us that raised their hand and took an oath. It's people who just really gave a shit. And, there's too many names to name that fall into these categories. So God bless them all and their families.
So what I'm fascinated by, and I think it's something that we always knew, but to hear it again today and listen to Tom talk about going through this list of 37 Port Authority police officers of various ranks and the intimate level of relationships that he's had to lose that many people in one day, plus losing the almost 3,000 civilians that we all care about anyway. It's just like how do we even respond and prevail from that? And we do. And yeah, you're going to say it. Go ahead, say it, Pete. I know what you're going to say. It's okay to be.
It's okay to not be okay. Look, man, that's the thing, man. I got to give the military credit. Law enforcement, for the longest time, you couldn't say, hey, man, I need help. And we've talked about this on the show almost every episode. Military came out and realized, hey, PTSD is the thing, and they started treating their people. Law enforcement is lagging behind, but man, it's okay to not be okay. And if anybody's listening, this is a rough week for all of us. Talk to somebody, man. And if you can't talk to your department, talk to a priest, talk to a friend. Don't sit there and suffer in silence, man. You made it this far. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Walk towards the light.
Yeah, well, Pete, as well as everybody else. I mean, if you did say that, especially if you had a secret clearance, you had there's a chance you're going to lose that clearance. So
right. Well, Trump did away with that. You can't lose a clearance for PTSD anymore. In his first term,
great. That's good to hear.
Trump tossed that. Yeah.
That's
and
right.
It was because of our veterans that he did that. So, that's, again, a good gesture. Man, I mean, how do we not support the people that went overseas, gave of themselves, came back and are messed up because we sent them there? I mean, they shouldn't be penalized for that. They should be put on a pedestal, frankly. I mean, we're all human beings. We're not designed to see the things that we saw. It's just we did a job that unfortunately leaves a scar or many scars.
Yeah. And the guy I couldn't see before was Mike Hooley. I didn't know Mike, but I do know his family well today. But I when you reposted it, I could see who it is now.
Yeah.
Bottom center.
Okay, so if it's okay with you guys, I'm going to go through the roll call. I am going to do some house cleaning. So I'm going to leave it to you guys. Any final thoughts? Because I'm going to rip it through the names. We need to acknowledge them. They need to be announced out loud so we never forget. And then I'll do the housekeeping podcast cleanup.
Well, my only comment, Tommy, is Mr. McHale, it's an honor to meet you, Tom. I'm glad that you're healing and on the mend. And I know you got some other stuff ahead of you, man. I hope it all works out. But we never spoke. I know we've had some LinkedIn conversations in the past.
Yeah.
But honored to finally see your face and to hear you. You're a hero. And it's an honor to be here with you.
I appreciate it. I prefer the word patriot over hero, but I appreciate that, Pete, and it's a two-way street. Same here, and I'm really looking forward to reading your book, once I get. Yeah.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate the support.
Yeah. We'll read. You read his book, and then when you come back, because we want to hear about some of the investigations and the cop killers that you pursued in addition to the terrorists. Okay, so you ready, folks? I'm going to just go through it. Port Authority Police Department, Police Officer Krista Amoroso, Police Officer Maurice Vincent Barry, Police Officer Liam Callahan, Lieutenant Robert Siri, Police Officer Clinton Davis Sr., Police Officer Donald Foreman, Police Officer Greg John Forner, Police Officer Thomas Edward Gorham, Police Officer Uhuru Ganja, Houston, Police Officer George G. Howard, Police Officer Stephen Husko Jr., Inspector Anthony Infante, Police Officer Paul Jurgens, Sergeant Kalfers, Sergeant Robert Kalfers, Police Officer Paul Lizinski, Police Officer David Lemange, Police Officer John Lennon, not the singer, Police Officer John Dennis Levi, Police Officer James Lynch, Captain Kathy Mazza, Police Officer Donald McIntyre, Police Officer Walter Arthur McNeil, Superintendent Fred Marone, Police Officer Joseph Navas, Police Officer James Nelson, Police Officer Alphonse Niedermeyer III, Police Officer James Parham, Police Officer Dominic Pizzulo, Police Officer Bruce Reynolds, Police Officer Antonio Jose Rodriguez, Police Officer Richard Rodriguez, Chief James Ramito,
yeah.
Police Officer John Scala, Police Officer Waylon Stewart Jr., Police Officer Kenneth Tejan, Police Officer Nathaniel Webb, Police Officer Michael Holy. New York City Police Department, Sergeant John Coughlin, Sergeant Michael Curtin, Police Officer John Delara, Police Officer Vinny Dans, Police Officer Jerome Dominguez, Police Officer Stephen Driscoll, Police Officer Mark Ellis, Police Officer Robert Fazio, Sergeant Rodney Gillis, Police Officer Rod Klopfer, Police Officer Tom Langone, Police Officer James Leahy, Police Officer Brian McDonald, Police Officer John Perry, Police Officer Glenn Pettit, Detective Claude D. Richards, Sergeant Timmy Roy, Police Officer Moira Smith, Police Officer Ramon Suarez, Police Officer Talty, Police Officer Santos Valentin, Detective Joe Vigiano, Police Officer Walter Weaver, Sergeant New York State Court Officer, Sergeant Court Officer Thomas Jurgens, Captain William Thompson Sr., Sergeant Mitchell Wallace, FDNY Fire Marshal Ron Buca, Federal Agents Master Special Officer Greg Miller, Special Agent Leonard Hatton. This is a podcast. This is not a service. I'm sorry I wasn't as clear and as.
Uh-oh, we lost his mic.
Yeah.
Tommy, your mic's dead again. Well, at least he got all the names read off.
He did, and he did a good job too.
He did. And you know what, man? The most important thing is let's pray for them and their families, and may God hold them all close, and may God bless all of their families.
And
Can you hear me now?
I
Yes,
got you
we
now.
can.
May they continue to look after us.
Yes, by all means.
Okay. All right. So Pete's book. All right. So with that, let me drop this. Any final thoughts? I'm sorry. The names were quick. Like I said, this is not a memorial service, but I wanted to say their names out loud.
I think you did a very good job.
And your mic made it through all the names, Tommy, so we're good there.
I mean, it's a podcast and we're in a tavern, and it's a simulated tavern. However, we're never forgetting those names. Tom, your recall on all of those people was phenomenal. It shows that you truly have never forgotten. I know Pete and I have never forgotten our folks. I'm not going to pretend that I can remember everybody and the 343 firefighters. You are not forgotten, but that's not what today is about. If somebody thinks that these cops on this podcast should do firemen, all right, let's hear it. I mean, no more alligator arms for the firemen. You know, they got to buck up to the bar and put the money on the bar, you know, cash up on the bar. And then we'll do that. But all the love and respect to the firemen who had perished on that day and have since then. You're not forgotten. It's not, but that's not what today was about. But you're not forgotten. So with that, final thoughts, and then I'll go into the podcast house cleaning.
No, man, it was a great episode. And like I said earlier, man, may God bless them. And look, truthfully, the ones who are still alive and fighting for their lives, because there's a lot of them in the health program and whatnot. So let's just pray for everybody, man.
Yeah, just exactly. Can't top what Pete.
We're going to have you back. We're going to have you back to talk about that career. It's too stellar, legendary to ignore. The kids, and when I say the kids on the job right now, they need to hear it, and they need to go forth because that pendulum's swinging back, and we really need that to happen. And
well, I appreciate you guys having me on today. I really do. Thank you very much. And finally, even though it's by video, you know, finally got a chance to meet both of you. So
until next time, brother.
All right. Well, so I don't hang on, Tom. Stay with us 2 minutes, and we'll talk post show to just do a regroup, and then we'll let me go through the podcast stuff. So we're constantly, as we should, whistleblower Pete telling the truth on government corruption. PeterJForcelli.com, The Deadly Path, The Fast and Furious Whistleblower Story, Amazon, Google Books, Simon & Schuster. Please get on that. The Finest Unfiltered tomorrow, Wednesday, 8:05 a.m. Eastern. Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, you'll hear it on the end. Tomorrow night, Ron Lace and Rob Lukash, The Executive Perspective, Wednesday, 5:05 p.m. tomorrow on September 10th. Never forget September 11th. It's their perspective on the 9/11 issues. The 9/11 response from their perspective, and then as executives, what their oversight looks like. It would be really interesting conversation to hear from their perspective because they're executives and their executive perspectives. Two executives I would have loved to have worked for. And then the Sal Greco show on Thursday, 1:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So with that, you can find The Finest Unfiltered on YouTube at The Finest Unfiltered, and then X, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook at Ten-Four Tavern. And then Pete and I, our most prominent social media platform is LinkedIn. That's where we are. Tom McCale, you can find him on there as well. So we can do that. So with that, guys, I'm going to wrap up and do the outro. And if you guys can stay on, and we'll do a post-show wrap-up. Good night, everybody. Love everybody. Appreciate everybody. God bless America. God bless the Port Authority Police Department. God bless the New York City Police Department. God bless the Fire Department, state courts. God bless America.
Stay safe.
Yes.